Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Peter Jones. You will have seen him on shows like The Contrarians, Grant's Rock Warehouse, Rock Daydream Nation, and of course you will have also seen him here on the channel on one or two of my panels. So Peter, wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for doing this series. We've been planning this one for a while, haven't we?
We have, but things have aligned and we're really going to move forward. And I'm really grateful and excited to be a part of this. This is a fun series.
Yeah, thank you. And before we get into the show, I just wanted to show off my latest acquisition for my Rush collection, which is Signals. Just picked this one up locally from a guy about 20 minutes drive away from me. It's a UK pressing rather than an Australian pressing, but it is in really nice nick. So, and thank you to Alex Nelson from RushFans, who was the one who recommended this album for me in the first place. So Peter, can you please let the viewers know which album you've picked for me, a little bit of the background behind that album, and most importantly, why you picked this album for me?
The album I picked was one that I had in mind immediately when I found out you were doing this series. So I kind of was campaigning for it. So I decided to pick Fly By Night. And this was released in February of '75. And the reason I picked it is because I think it's seminal on a lot of different levels. Knowing that you had started with the debut and that wasn't a good experience, the very next album was the one that I wanted to jump into right away. With all of the firsts that it has, obviously the first with Neil, the first with Terry Brown, the whole kind of change in direction. So I thought it was essential that I follow both chronologically, and I think its importance will be expressed as we go along as to why I picked this one.
Yeah, no, well, I thank you for it. It was an interesting listen for me. I'll say right off the top that compared with all the other Rush albums that I've done in this series so far, this was a culture shock. And, you know, the first time I listened to this album, I wasn't sure I was going to like it. But let's get into the track by track, because I think you'll find that you know, with repeated listenings, I did actually warm to this album quite a bit. So the first song is Anthem, which I believe is, you know, still considered to be a Rush classic. And straight away, this is a different sounding Rush to me, you know, compared with A Farewell to Kings, which is the other 70s album that I've done so far. The intro is a little bit proggy, but the main part of the song is more sort of straight ahead, heavy rock. Geddy's vocals are so high. They're just really soaring. Now I understand, because when I first started doing the series, I was sort of in the early 80s. And, you know, I sort of knew that people had a problem with Geddy Lee's voice, but I didn't really understand it from the albums that I'd been listening to. On this, I can hear it, because I know I'm a big Yes fan. And I know a lot of people have a problem with John Anderson's voice just because it's so high. And I can understand why people may have had the same sort of problem with Geddy, because his voice is also so high on these early albums. The lyric is really good. I mean, it's sort of the first Neil Peart lyric that you get on a Rush album, and it's about being true to yourself, which I think is a wonderful topic for a song. It's a very stripped back sound. It's just guitar, bass, drums. There's next to no overdubbing on this at all. I can't imagine this album took them more than a couple of weeks to record. Whereas you know, the later albums, obviously they took a lot more time with. You know, this is a really strong opener for the album, though. Really like it.
Excellent. I have to say that I was also excited because, having seen what you have watched so far, this is the first of that, what we call the earliest period. You know, from the debut, this to Crest of Steel and 2112. So they're kind of packaged from there through all the worlds of stage, and then things change. And it is totally different from the debut. And, that's why I thought it was so important to just all of a sudden see one album later with one different member and a different producer. They just completely right turned. They went the other direction.
Yeah.
Anthem is the first song I ever heard them play live. They opened on the Hemispheres tour in '78 when I saw them. And this has always been one of my top favorite Rush songs. It is my favorite Alex guitar solo, and his wah pedal. It is amazing. And I think Geddy's bass line under this is just spectacular. And
Yes.
of course, Neil's drumming is very good as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So the second song is Best I Can. This one, Geddy writes the lyric for. It's a bit of a sort of a love of rock and roll kind of lyric, but it's not a hackneyed one. It doesn't, I mean, I love Kiss, and they do a lot of sort of, songs about loving rock and roll. And some of those can come across like lyrically as a little bit cheesy.
Right.
This one I don't think is nearly as cheesy as those sort of lyrics are. Music, it's quite simple again, but it's rocking. And I noticed Neil's drumming on this song in particular, you can hear the difference that he makes to the band right here in this song. So yeah.
There's a lot of Neil-isms in this, things that carry over through his career, signature licks, signature fills, and things that he does. But I think one of the things that it really starts to signify is how unified compositionally, which translates to performance-wise, how he and Geddy are locked in. And that is something that carries over the rest of their career. I never felt that John, who's a very respectable drummer, and Geddy were never in this kind of lockstep. The unification of the purpose of their rhythms really stands out on both of these tracks so far. And I think that's one of the things that I really gravitated to.
Yeah. So the next song we have is Beneath, Between and Behind. I felt this one was probably the one song on this album that kind of harks back sonically to the debut album. It has that sort of Zeppelin-y sound that I think the debut has a lot of. The lyric is sort of historical sort of themes and talking about war and that sort of thing. This one, because it does sort of hark back to the debut sonically, this probably is my least favorite song on the album, but I still quite like it. Even at this early point of their career, all three of these guys are just outstanding players, and they would just get better and better as their career went on. So yeah.
What I loved about this one is that while from the riff standpoint, and I think Alex is the one that really makes you hearken back more to the first album with his tone and his style, Neil's drumming is very kind of unorthodox. He's using a different kind of beat here with tom beats instead of just straight back beats, which gives it a whole kind of different flair that was nowhere near to be found on the first record. And I think this is one of the tracks that really live really started to develop and shine through, especially rather Time of Moving Pictures, when they added this to the set list. It just fit right in and just sounded like classic Rush.
Yeah. And then side one closes out with By-tor and the Snow Dog. And, here we have some sort of fantasy lyrics that I first got exposed to on Farewell to Kings.
Right.
I started off, as I said, with a lot of the 80s albums, and Neil had pretty much abandoned the fantasy lyrics by that stage and was writing more sort of, real life lyrics, as it were. But this one I really like. The first two verses are sort of straight ahead hard rock. really good. But then you get this wonderful extended instrumental section, which is sort of the battle between By-tor and the Snow Dog. And Alex does these like growling noises on the guitar to sort of symbolize the Snow Dog. And then things start getting really, really proggy when you get into this sort of 7/8 section.
Right.
And then you get this beautiful sort of eerie, quiet instrumental part. And then you get sort of like, I think they call it the hymn at the end,
Right.
which is wonderful. And then you get the third verse sort of closing out the story of the song. You know, this is really the first taste, I think, for me on this album of Rush going sort of out and out prog, which again they didn't really do on the first album. You know, the album, that first album was very much a hard rock record. But yeah, this song I feel like more than anything else on the album, except maybe one or two of the songs at the end, but this song I think really points to where Rush was going to go in the future.
Right. I'm unapologetic. By-tor is my favorite Rush song of their entire catalog. I think it's that important. It's transition to so many other great songs that have followed, all kind of get their genesis here. I think Neil's drumming is spectacular. The three fills he does before the unison 7/8 section is mind-blowing. They're my favorite fills of his entire career. Bass playing is spectacular. Alex's guitar work is stunning, and I think it's, in my opinion, the most important track of their catalog.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I would say it's probably my favorite on the album too. So, although there's a couple coming up that will rival it. So then we get on to side 2, and it starts off with the title track, "Fly By Night," which is a song about sort of leaving one's old life behind and making a new start. You know, even on his first album, as I said earlier, Neil is writing meaningful lyrics, which I think is wonderful. You know, that's really been a recurring theme for me with this band, is how important the lyrics are.
Right.
You know, this is a nice, relatively short, mid-tempo song. And, you know, throughout this album, Alex plays some really, really tasty solos, and this one's no exception. I really love the solo on this song.
Yeah, you know, it's really great. And unfortunately, it's not a real favorite of the band. Geddy's on record. He doesn't mention the title, but you know, this is not one that's going to show up. Was going to show up on a later tour because he's just not a fan of it, which is sad. You know, it had probably the most radio play at the time, and which obviously makes the follow-up even more depressing for them because there wasn't anything to follow it up with. But it's a very catchy, it's a straightforward kind of hard rock / pop song, and I've always liked it. I didn't like live. Later on, they truncated it a bit and took out the middle section. The earlier tours have it, which is great. If you can get bootlegs of that, it's amazing. But most people, if you tell them this album, that's the one song that they'll have had some reference with or some connection with. So.
Yeah. So the next song is "Making Memories," and this one, the acoustic guitar, gives this a bit of a folky feel, which again is something new for them compared with what was on the first album. Geddy's bass on this song is really, really melodic, really nice. The lyric is about sort of enjoying the moment with your partner, not worrying about what's to come. Not used to Rush doing a sort of romantic lyric. They did do some of those a little sort of in the 90s and stuff, but
right.
A great slide solo from Alex. I love his slide guitar playing on this song.
Right.
It's another shorter but very enjoyable song for me.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more underrated tracks, not only on the album, but in this early part of their career. Um, and it's a very cohesive song, and it moves forward, and the sentiment, it makes you smile.
Yeah,
It's, I believe the story is, and I'm sure others know more about it than me, but they were, on one of their million car trek tours, took wrong turns and got lost. And they're like, well, I guess let's just make the most of it because we're making memories while we're doing it. And maybe road life's not so bad. You
yeah,
know, it's got a really nice, happy feel to it. And you can relate to it if you've ever done any kind of touring. You're just
yeah,
like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Great
yeah,
playing on it by everybody too.
yeah. So then we get the song Rivendell, which is a really, really delicate song that to me wouldn't sound out of place on a Yes album. Um, it's got a Lord of the Rings inspired lyric, as you can tell from the title. Um, it's a beautiful vocal from Geddy, and the classical guitar, which I believe Geddy plays as well, along with Alex doing this really lovely, sort of tasty little tone pedal guitar bits,
Right.
that give it this really sort of spooky atmospheric feel, which I really, really love. Um, this is probably my favorite Rush ballad so far in the catalog. As my long-term viewers will know, I've had a bit of a mixed run when it comes to Rush ballads. Some of them I've quite
Right.
liked, and some of them have been sort of my least favorite songs on the album. But this is absolutely gorgeous. I love it.
It at first, when I got this in real time, it threw me for a loop. Coming from Anthem and By-tor, I was like, where are they going? You weren't really open to ballads in 1975. But it's really grown. It's a beautiful melody. Alex has always been so tasty with his volume swelling and things like that. It almost comes off more string-like, as if it had been played by a bowed instrument, because that beautiful legato
Mm,
sound that he gets. I do think that Geddy's voice is a touch immature still versus what he would deliver even on Panacea on the next record, or Tears, Madrigal, which you heard on A Farewell to Kings.
mm,
Uh, so his voice clearly got stronger and more mature, and he could handle something more delicate with a lot more authenticity. It's not a bad vocal. It just sounds like he's just not fully in his full voice yet. The high
yeah,
voice is there, but he hadn't developed the richness or anything that came later on later albums. But it's a very nice melody, and it's a fun song. It's a great track.
yeah. It's beautiful. So then the album rather fittingly ends with a song called "In the End." Um, this starts quietly with acoustic guitar, bass, and just sort of cymbal runs from Neil. Then the electric guitar kicks in. And then at that point, Geddy's vocals really take off into the stratosphere. Um, yeah, it's a slow but crunchy groove that this song has, which I really, really like. Um, I think he froze up again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start the "In the End" part again. That's all right. We were fine at the end of Rivendell, so that's fine. Okay, so the album ends rather appropriately with a song called "In the End," which this song starts quietly with just sort of acoustic guitar, bit bass, and Neil just sort of doing little sort of fills on the cymbals. Um, then the electric guitar kicks in and Geddy's vocals sort of take off into the stratosphere. You get this slow but crunchy groove, which I really, really like. It's a cool end to an album that, this album really did take me by surprise at first. As I said at the beginning, when I first listened to this album, I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I have some of the other Rush albums, but it was a real grower on me. By the time I was getting to the fourth, fifth, sixth listen to it, I really realized that this is a really good album. It's different, no doubt about that, but I really, really like it, and it's definitely a quantum leap from what they did on the debut album.
Right. Yeah. And I've always loved In the End, and I think the version on All the World's a Stage is just breathtaking. It's spectacular. It gets so heavy, and it's such a slower, like you said, kind of a much more aggressive groove to it. And Geddy's just crushing it. And it is a different record. And especially looking at the albums that you've done so far, this has just got to be a complete what in the world were you expecting or not expecting? Who knows what was coming? Those of us who saw it in real time were able to take step by step with the band and progress through all of these and see where the elements changed over time. So this had to have been pretty dramatic, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really, really, as I say, it was a culture shock, but I grew to really like this album in the end. So thank you so much for recommending this album for me.
Absolutely.
To my viewers, if you want to see more of Peter Jones, please go and check out The Contrarians, go and check out Grant's Rock Warehouse, go and check out Rock Daydream Nation. I'm sure there are other places that Peter's been on as well. There are also a couple of great panels that Peter's been on my channel, so please be sure to give those a look too. Would really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Peter. I really, really enjoyed this.
Pleasure was all mine, and very excited and happy to be a part of it, and can't wait to see how you discover the rest of the catalog.
Yeah, I've got a couple more of these early 70s albums coming up, so that should be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. Everything's playlisted, so if you want to see some of the other episodes in the Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush series, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at some of my studio albums rank shows, there's a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearance on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those, so you can go and check those out. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I now have a dedicated Bicycle Legs Facebook page. Please come and give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.